John McAllister had always believed that life slowed down when a person reached old age, but he never imagined it would slow down this much. At 68, he lived alone on his wide, sun-washed ranch in New Mexico, where the land stretched out in every direction like a warm, quiet sea of grass and dust. His home was a simple one-story house with a wooden porch that creaked every time he stepped on it. The horses grazed lazily in the pasture, the windmill hummed in the breeze, and the days passed in peaceful routine. He woke before sunrise, made himself a strong cup of coffee, and fed the horses before the desert heat rolled in. After that, he fixed fences, checked water troughs, and sometimes rode out on his old chestnut horse, Molly, just to feel the gentle rhythm of her steps under him. John liked the calm. He liked the predictability. But even he couldn't deny that sometimes the quiet felt too deep, too empty, like a big house with all the lights off. His wife, Annie, had passed 8 years ago. Since then, he had become the kind of man who talked to his animals more than he talked to people. He didn't mind, but the silence inside the house often echoed louder than he expected. Still, he chose to stay. The ranch was his history, his comfort, and the place where all his memories lived. One warm afternoon, when the sun hovered low and the sky turned soft orange, John was repairing a broken piece of fence on the east side of the property. He wiped the sweat from his forehead and stretched his back, ready to finish for the day. But as he leaned over to grab another tool, something unusual caught his eye. Far across the open land, near the fence line, small shapes were moving toward him. At first, he thought it was a group of hikers who had lost their way, or maybe tourists who had wandered off from a nearby trail. But as the shapes got closer, he realized it was a group of 4 women, walking slowly, almost carefully, like they were tired from a long journey. He stood up straight, watching them approach. They carried small backpacks and wore simple clothes, dusty from travel. Their steps were steady but heavy, and they stayed close together, as if they were supporting one another. It was rare for anyone to come walking across his land, especially from that direction. There was nothing out there, no roads, no rest stops, no houses, only wide desert. When they finally reached the fence, the oldest of the women lifted her hand in a polite gesture. She looked to be in her mid-40s, with long dark hair tied back neatly. Her eyes held both strength and exhaustion. "Sir," she said gently, "we're sorry to come this way without notice. We're Apache women from a nearby community. We've been traveling for a while, and we hoped, if it's possible, to rest somewhere safe for the night." John blinked in surprise. He opened the fence and motioned them through, still processing the situation. "You walked all this way?" he asked, kindly. "Yes," the woman said. "We didn't have another choice. My name is Maria. These are my nieces and my sister." John nodded, noticing how tired they looked. The youngest, maybe 19, kept glancing around nervously, as if she wasn't sure they were welcome. The other 2 women, both in their 20s or early 30s, stood quietly, their posture straight but weary. "I see," John said thoughtfully. "And you're asking for a place to rest for the night?" "If it's not any trouble," Maria said softly. "We won't stay longer than you allow." John hesitated. Not because he felt uncertain about them, but because he had lived alone for so long that the idea of strangers on his ranch felt unfamiliar. Still, he had been raised to help those who needed it, and something about their polite behavior and tired eyes touched him deeply. "It's no trouble," he finally said, giving a small, reassuring smile. "I have an old bunkhouse near the barn. It's simple, but clean. You're welcome to stay there." Relief washed over their faces. The youngest woman even sighed a little, like a burden had lifted from her shoulders. As John led them toward the bunkhouse, he noticed little details: Maria walking slightly ahead, as if she felt responsible for the others, the young one holding her backpack tightly to her chest, and the 2 in the middle keeping a steady pace, watching their surroundings with quiet alertness. They weren't lost. They weren't confused. They were careful. And that stirred a small spark of curiosity in John. When they reached the bunkhouse, John opened the door and let them step inside. The place had 2 small beds, a table, and a tiny kitchenette. He used it for ranch hands back in the day, but he hadn't hired help in years. Still, it was tidy. "This will work perfectly," Maria said with gratitude in her voice. "Thank you, Mr. McAllister," he answered. "John McAllister." "Thank you, Mr. McAllister," she repeated warmly. He nodded and left them to settle in, though his mind was buzzing with questions he didn't ask. Why had they traveled so far on foot? What made them choose his ranch, of all places? And why did they seem so alert, as if they were paying attention to every sound? Later that evening, as the sky deepened into purple and the stars began to appear, John stood on his porch drinking tea. He glanced toward the bunkhouse from time to time. He wasn't worried, just thoughtful. The ranch had not seen guests in years, and the sudden arrival of 4 women, all at once, made the quiet land feel strangely full. After dark, as John locked up the barn, he noticed something else: a line of faint tire marks near the outer fence. They weren't from his truck, and they weren't old. The pattern looked fresh, made earlier that day. John crouched down, tracing the mark lightly with his finger. Whoever drove that vehicle had come close to his land, close enough to see the fence line. But he didn't hear an engine earlier, and there were no nearby roads. He stood up slowly, looking out across the quiet fields. He didn't feel frightened, only puzzled. The women had seemed sincere, polite, and in need of help. But now he wondered if someone else had passed through the area before them, or after them. The desert night was calm, but his thoughts moved like shifting sand. As he walked back toward the house, he tried to brush away the questions. He told himself it was probably nothing, just someone exploring, or someone who took a wrong turn. Still, he couldn't help glancing toward the bunkhouse one more time. A warm light glowed from inside, and he could hear soft voices, gentle and calm. John stepped inside his home and sat in his old rocking chair. The day had taken a surprising turn, and although he didn't know why the women had appeared, or what their story truly was, he felt something unusual in the air change. A shift, as if the ranch itself sensed something new arriving. He didn't know it yet, but this unexpected evening was the beginning of a story that would soon reshape his quiet, predictable life in ways he never imagined. The next morning arrived gently, the sky painted in soft pink and gold. John stepped outside with a cup of warm coffee in his hand. The air felt fresh, and the quiet of the early hours wrapped around the ranch like a soft blanket. He wondered if his unexpected guests were awake yet. The bunkhouse was still, the windows dim, but he knew they must be tired after their long walk across the land. He sat on the porch for a while, watching the horses wander in the pasture and the small clouds float above the hills. He enjoyed mornings like this, but today felt different. There was a sense of movement in the air, like life on the ranch had shifted in a way he couldn't quite name. When he finally walked toward the bunkhouse, he heard soft voices inside, gentle conversation, not worried, just calm. He knocked lightly on the door. Maria opened it with a warm smile. "Good morning, Mr. McAllister," she greeted. "Good morning," he replied. "I thought maybe you all could use a warm breakfast." The younger women looked up, surprised and grateful. They followed him to the kitchen in the main house, where he had already fried some eggs and warmed tortillas on the stove. He wasn't used to cooking for anyone but himself, but seeing the women sit together at his table made his home feel unexpectedly bright. The youngest woman, whose name he now learned was Rosa, ate quietly at first, glancing around shyly. The 2 women in the middle, Elena and Marcy, helped pass plates and thanked him politely each time. Maria, steady and calm, seemed to watch over them all like a patient guardian. After they finished eating, John sat with them for a moment. He didn't want to pry, but he sensed they needed someone to talk to, someone who would simply listen. "If you don't mind me asking," he said gently. What brought you all this far from home? The women exchanged glances, and for a moment, the room felt thoughtful. Finally, the youngest, Rosa, took a breath and spoke softly. We left home because things felt unsettled, she said, carefully choosing her words. There were disagreements among families, and it made the place feel uneasy. We didn't feel it was safe for us to stay, while people were upset with each other. John listened closely. She wasn't saying anything harmful or frightening, just explaining that personal matters had made them uncomfortable. He nodded, kindly. I understand. Sometimes, it's best to step away from a place until things calm down, he replied. Elena added, We thought about staying with relatives, but they were also feeling pressure from the situation. We didn't want to burden anyone. Two. So we walked, Marcy said quietly. We kept moving until we found your ranch. John took a long sip of coffee, thinking. Well, you're welcome to rest here for a while, he said. I don't mind. This ranch has plenty of space, and I can always use extra company. They thanked him again, and for a while, the house felt warm, with small conversations. It felt like life had returned to the quiet rooms. Later that afternoon, while the women rested or helped with small chores like sweeping the porch or giving the horses fresh water, John decided to call an old friend. Raymond Begay had grown up near the same lands as the women. John respected him deeply and trusted his perspective. When Raymond answered, John explained the situation simply. 4 women traveling, feeling unsettled at home, needing a place to rest. Raymond listened with care. I know Maria and her family, Raymond said thoughtfully. They're good people, honest people. If they came all the way to your ranch, they must really have felt uncomfortable where they were. Do you think anyone is looking for them? John asked gently. Raymond paused. Probably their family, but only out of concern. Nothing to worry about. I'll come by tomorrow to check on them and make sure everything at home has settled a bit. John felt relieved. Having a familiar face visit would help everyone feel at ease. That evening, the ranch felt lively in a gentle way. Elena helped chop vegetables for supper, while Marcy washed the apples. Rosa sat outside in the rocking chair, watching the sunset as if she were memorizing the colors. Maria helped John set the table, moving around the kitchen like she had known it for years. During dinner, they shared small stories, Maria's memories of her childhood, Elena's dreams of starting a craft shop, Rosa's love for writing, and Marcy's hope of learning to work with animals. John shared tales about his ranching days, about Molly the horse, and even a funny memory about getting stuck in a muddy ditch 20 years ago. The laughter that filled the house felt warm and genuine. It had been years since John heard so many voices under his roof. The ranch, which had once felt large and empty, now felt full. After the meal, as the women returned to the bunkhouse with smiles and soft thank yous, John stepped onto his porch for a moment of quiet. The moon was rising, round and silver, casting gentle light over the fields. He took a deep breath. He felt peaceful, yet aware that change was happening right in front of him. The next morning, just as John was gathering tools to repair another section of the fence, he heard a familiar truck coming up the long dirt road. Raymond's blue pickup came to a stop near the barn. He stepped out, waving. "Morning, John." "Morning, Ray." Raymond greeted the women warmly, and they smiled in relief when they recognized him. He sat with them and John at the porch table, listening as they explained the situation in simple, calm words. Raymond assured them that everything at home had already started to settle, and that people were simply concerned for their well-being. "There's no pressure for you to return right away," he said gently. "Take your time. When you're ready, I'll help you get back." The women nodded with gratitude. They didn't seem scared, only relieved to know things were improving. For the next few days, the ranch followed a peaceful routine. The women helped with small chores around the property, like brushing the horses, washing dishes, or sweeping the porch. They took long walks around the open land, enjoying the peace they had been missing. They laughed more often. They talked openly with John about their dreams. John felt something inside him shift too. Each day, he found himself smiling more, talking more, feeling a kind of warmth he hadn't felt in years. The ranch didn't feel lonely. The walls didn't echo anymore. The days seemed shorter, filled with gentle company and soft conversations. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, John and Maria stood near the corral watching the horses. Maria looked around quietly, taking in the peaceful scene. "You have a special place here, Mr. McAllister," she said. "A place where people can breathe." John smiled, touched by her words. "I'm glad it could help you all." "You helped more than you know," she replied kindly. As days turned into a week, the women began to prepare for their return home. They felt renewed, calm, and ready to face their community again. On the final morning of their stay, they gathered their bags and stood beside John's porch. Raymond had returned to drive them home. There were hugs, warm wishes, and grateful smiles all around. "This ranch will always be a peaceful memory for us," Elena said warmly. "You're welcome to visit any time," John replied sincerely. As the truck drove off, John waved until it disappeared beyond the hills. When he turned back toward the house, he realized something important. The ranch didn't feel empty anymore, even though the women were gone. Something inside him had changed. The quiet didn't feel as heavy. The land felt warm, alive, and full of promise again. It was as if their visit had awakened a new meaning in his life, a reminder that even the quietest places can be touched by unexpected kindness and new beginnings.